sure you all know Emmy's work. I certainly do. And I think you are clearly an activist poet in that your poetry is quite focused and weaponized in a way. I wonder if you think that that's something that you can specifically do with poetry, or could any artist be an activist artist in that way?
Thank you so much, and it was really wonderful hearing you talk about that. As a fellow Goodwill ambassador with Neil, it's been very, very nice hearing you talk sometimes. I love it. What I would say, actually, it's really funny because I'm reminded of something that Maurice Sendak said a long time ago. He said that somebody asked him, like, did you set out to write children's work? He said, no, I write, and they tell me it's for children. And so to sort of borrow that, you know, my first book came out in 2018. A lot of my poems are love poems, but the poems that I use in my work specifically tend to be the ones that I initially wrote to process what's happening. You know, I write and I perform for different reasons. I write to process all that has happened and to take back the agency, to push back against the silence of being where I'm from. But I perform because I think sometimes people need to hear it, or sometimes you need to influence the conversation in a way that sort of reaches people where they least expect to be reached. And I think that's the best way to sort of bring someone to a table. If you surprise them, if you help them hear something they may not have heard before. Because I think the interesting thing about having so many people in the world and having so many artists and so many voices in a space is just that sometimes it becomes oversaturated and we become desensitized. But poetry, I think it is inherently a form of protest, whether you're protesting against a former lover with your love poems or against, you know, what happened in Darfur, like where I'm from. And to me, I think maybe I gravitate toward poetry most of the time. Yeah, I do write other kinds of things, but it's the poetry that I find reaches people the most. Yeah. So I guess my answer is I don't really know how to answer that.
Stan, how would you answer that question? Do you see yourself... I liked Emmy's thing of saying you catch people where they least expect it. And in a way, The Ministry of the Future is a sort of blockbuster on one level. It's also a book you might pick up in the airport for a very long flight and be completely... you know, you can't put it down. So, in a way, you're sneaking this massive message through a very popular genre.
Well, it's a beautiful thing that science fiction is as popular as it is, and fantasy as well, as Neil has shown. Every story that you set in the future, you expose a politics and a theory of history. Things happen in the future because we did things in the present. You can't escape it, and so you might as well put it to use. You can teach, and the idea that art is for entertainment only and that education needs to be educational is wrong, and the two are very close to each other, and Brecht is very good on this, Aristotle's very good on this. So I think if you think of art as having a political element, then it also needs to be beautiful, and like a vase or something else that's both useful and beautiful. So it's a line you have to try to negotiate.
And have you been surprised by how many people have had their minds changed by reading The Ministry of the Future?
I sure have. I've had a long and happy career. So with the usual kind of roller coaster ups and downs, it hasn't been steady. But this book, I think, fills a hunger that people had.
Excuse me for a moment, sorry. Excuse me, I'll be right back.
A hunger that people had for a story of a future that was positive, of us getting through this century without a mass extinction event, that you could still believe in while you were reading it. So that's an important qualifier. The wish fulfillment of stories is easy to do, but then trying to make it plausible, given the situation that we're in now, it ended up being a long book.
And Amy, you do a lot of work with refugees around the world, particularly in Africa. Do you find that you can use the power of stories and poetry there, and how?
In the space of advocating for refugees, Yeah, actually, as a former refugee and also as a scientist, as you mentioned, it's funny because Stan and I started out this conference on the same panel. And
What was the topic of that panel?
the role of storytelling
Very good.
in climate change. And so I'm sorry if you're going to hear some of the same things, but, you know, I studied anthropology and molecular cellular developmental biology at Yale. I got a certificate in global health. I'm going into medicine. But I constantly choose poetry because I think it breaks down the barriers between you and another person. And it's almost a very disarming way to approach someone. Art is disarming. But it could also, you know, fire people up. It can do anything. And I feel like the reason that I constantly go back to it is because it helps me bring forth a lot of the voices that are not usually welcome in these sorts of spaces. Not because, you know, we haven't evolved enough to include marginalized voices, but because the way that we've built the space, the way that we've created sort of, we were just talking about it, gates and things like that, that actually prevent access or make it a lot harder to access the sort of resources that you need to make the change that you need to make in these spaces. I think the role of what we're doing, or what I'm here to do at least, is just to try to get people away from abstractions and more to grounding things in the reality of lived experience. My dad was born in a village that doesn't exist anymore. And it was a combination of conflict and climate change before we called it climate change. And the reality is that when I talk about these dire circumstances, or just like when Stan talks about the future, I think our goal is similar, to try and actually tell people, hey, you know, it's really, really dire, but there is still a way out. For me, I have to believe in a way out, because if I don't believe in it, then everyone that I love who's still there will not make it out. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both. Now, I'd love, while we wait for Brian to come back, I'd love, Emmy, for you to read. Do you want to read from the podium?
Okay, so we're shaking things up.
Yes, you can do whatever you like.
Right. That's
Okay. And
not
Stan.
Neil.
That's Neil. Oh, no, that's Olafa. He's already here. Neil, thank you. And thank you, Stan, very much indeed.
Yeah, I loved what you said and what everyone
Should I move
said.
now?
You can move now. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Neil,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Everyone, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you like this poem. It's called Di Baladna, which means this is our home. If you are reading this, I forgive you. You have grown far from the heart of me, my child. Have lost the familiar love we held for one another in your first years of life. When you were young, you marveled at the plants and critters that ran across my bosom. You worshipped the water, swam up and down my rivers, you drank from my rain, laughed at each first snow, begged for sun on the cloudy days. You didn't hesitate to sink your fingers into the mud of me and tickle loose little pebbles, seedlings, droplets, and worms. How you built a refuge for every wayward wanderer, lining the kitchen shelves in jars of butterflies and lightning bugs. You drank the breeze from my trees, the honey, sap, gum with joy and ease. How you came to me to rest your head at my tender hearth, your weary body in my pockets, you loved me. You nurtured me before you knew what it was to nurture, tended me before you knew what it was to tend. Tiller, sower, farmer, green-thumbed little one, you knew me. Lately, you hurt me. You break and cut and tear into me, and I forgive you. For I am a part of you, like your brothers and sisters before you, so I forgive you. I forgive you again for the reaping you do with no intention to sow, again for the waste and greed and gluttony when you were young. You asked me why they do this. Once brothers and sisters, now staining the earth with the blood of your people, tearing apart the branches of your family tree. You losing hope and ground all in one fell swoop, you came to me. Resting beneath the shade of date palms and magnolias, you begged me to make sense of it all. All I could offer you then was a promise that wherever you would go, you would find me. But lately, there isn't much left for me to promise. They've dug pits into my sides, have stolen the rubies, gold, and diamonds my place in my thighs. I do all I can to heal, but my weary body won't clear away the hurt so easily. My waters rush
but do not soothe. The air in my lungs suffocates the little ones. I cough and spew and gush and bruise, and it will not heal. When a child of mine dies by my hands, here, in the long-forgotten valleys of your youth, visitors come not of their own accord, but by necessity, and I am made whole again. Abdul Ghani and Izdahara sink their hands into the mud of me, saplings cling, and I am whole again. Hatim builds monuments to my skies, captures the sun, channels the lightning. Luca and Layatu surround their homes, and fruit born of me the children eat and grow and are healthy, and I am whole again. Usman protests, it isn't mine alone to mend, he says. I need you to build and build again, to make new, to bring forth life from relentless earth, making an oasis of charred terrain, creating refuge from nothing but scar tissue and lightning strikes. Let me be more to you than just a final resting place. Let me do more for you than call you home. Child of mine, if you are reading this, I need you, your mother. If this land could speak, would she thank us, praise us? Would she ridicule us or beg us? Would her voice be weary, gentle, disdainful? Would it shake with sorrow, with rage? I used to wonder about these things all the time. At 11 years old, I watched my neighbor's house crumble before my eyes. The floodwaters came and washed away the earth and clay most people used to build their homes. To see her wade through her home like that, to watch her try and salvage all that she had left. Our country was already locked in turmoil, and now the earth began to purge us too. If you could stop the next hurricane from wiping out your city, the next tornado from hitting your home, the next flood from starving your people, the next lightning strike from ending your life, wouldn't you? The locusts in the Horn of Africa, the floods in South Sudan, the ice in Chicago, the fires in California, Australia, the threat of rain that won't stop or rest that won't come. We are at the precipice of possible change, a turning point that can and will define us. Fire or ice? How will the world end? I don't know. But I don't want to find out. Not in our generation, and not in the next. Thank you.